this again. Call to order for the Tequesta Environmental Advisory Committee, November 13th, 2024, at 2 p.m. Could you do a roll call, please?
Of course. Brad Freese.
Here.
Tom Bradford.
Here.
Russ Redmond. Clay Damon.
Here.
Jill Wenta.
Here.
Michelle Schraus.
Here.
Wade Chance.
Here.
Approval of the agenda. I do have a modification. We're going to jumble up the order of the presentations. I'm going to have Meg go first, and then hopefully Steve Parker, and then Nick and Keith. Keith is going to be a little bit late, so I'd like for Keith and Nick's presentations to go on right after the other, hopefully, if he's here on time. If not, I may have to kind of let him speak as we go through the agenda. I don't know if a motion needs to be made for that, but
I'll do it. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the reordering of the presentations as mentioned by our chair.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so the first presentation is Megan Weibel.
Weibel. But I like Wobble. That works too.
Green initiatives for the Village of Tequesta.
There she goes. Okay, so we are going to talk about green building certification systems today. This is kind of part one of a two-part series. We're just going to go over the certifications, their versatility, how they're used, different categories and criteria that people would need to achieve to be certified in these green buildings. And then later, after we kind of get familiar with it, we're going to talk about different municipalities, how they have incentivized their communities to use these practices, and things of that nature. All right, so why build green? Green building is the practice of creating structures that are energy efficient, resource efficient, and environmentally responsible. It provides us with a unique opportunity to shape our landscape. It provides for sustainable change in the future. It improves living and working conditions. There are financial benefits for builders. All of these have a lower cost over the life of the projects. And there is the, of course, lasting environmental impact. There are 4 common certification examples. We have Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED, Florida Green Building Coalition, the FGBC, National Green Building Standard, the NGBS, and Energy Star Home Certification. These are all very common. They are all really unique, and we'll get into that. So the first one that we are going to talk about is LEED. This is managed by the U.S. Green Building Coalition. It is the most widely recognized out of all the certification systems. That's going to be globally and nationally. There are 4 levels to LEED certification: certified silver, gold, and platinum, and they use a third-party independent verification system to ensure that their criteria is being met. For versatility, we've got commercial, residential, and communities. Most people, when they think of LEED, they think of new projects, but LEED also does have a certification system for previously constructed projects called LEED OM, operational maintenance. Here are some local LEED buildings. We have a single-family residence in Hope Sound, the Max Planck Laboratory in Jupiter, and Jupiter Medical Center Cancer Center. I would note that there's maybe 2 single-family residences that are LEED certified. There are more commercial buildings, probably because of the price point we'll touch on. All right, so this is all of the different categories and how an applicant could acquire points in those categories. So you've got location, transportation, sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, material resources, air quality, innovation, and priority. For example, if I was building a new project and I decided that I wanted to put low flow faucets in and reduced water tank toilets, I could gain points under water efficiency. If I was building a commercial building and I wanted to put in a bus stop or some other type of mobility, I could get points under sustainable sites and location and transportation. All right, so like we talked about, there are 4 categories. Platinum for LEED is the best one. It's 80 points and beyond. These buildings decrease the environmental impact inspire others to strive for excellence. Next, we have gold. At the gold level, the project is earning at least 60% of the available points. They're exemplary models of sustainability. Silver is 50 to 59 points. Combined efforts result in decreased carbon footprint and enhanced indoor air quality. And then we have certified. Certified is, this project has acknowledged and taken the initial strides to reduce the impact of climate. Next, we're going to talk about Florida Green Building Coalition. So the thing that makes this unique is that it focuses on Florida's ecosystem and what we need to support our environment. This also has 4 levels to their certification system: certified, silver, gold, platinum, and they also use a third-party verification. When it comes to versatility, also they have commercial, residential, local government. Here are some local buildings: Cave Museum in Gainesville, Pine Jog Elementary in West Palm, Tampa Bay Times in St. Petersburg. And this is a breakdown of their categories and points criteria. So again, much like LEED, platinum, gold, silver, certified. National Green Building Standard. What separates this one is that it's focused on residential buildings. That can be a single-family home or a multi-unit family. Again, we have 4 levels of certification: bronze, silver, gold, emerald. They use a third party to verify. And again, it's residentially focused. So if a project or single-family home wanted to get an NGBS certification, it might cost them $1,000 to $2,500. The same home, if they went for a LEED certification, could go from $2,000 to $5,000. So really, when this was constructed, it was for residential. All right, certified buildings. We've got a multi-unit in Boca, single-family in Gardens, and a multi-unit in West Palm. This is the breakdown of their certification levels. And then we have Energy Star certification. So I'm sure you've all seen like Energy Star on your microwave or your dishwasher. This is actually Energy Star home certification. So it was set with standards in place by the EPA. It ultimately focuses on energy conservation and efficiency. This one is unique in that it is a single level certification. It's a one and done. You either are or you are not Energy Star certified. And of course, they use a third-party home energy rater to verify. Global Energy Star buildings: the Wolfson campus in Miami, Four Seasons Resort in Palm Beach, and Kitterman Apartments in Port St. Lucie. I'm going to go back here for a second. I did want to mention for Energy Star, the versatility is almost endless when it comes to Energy Star certification. It's appliances, it's homes, it's commercial, industrial, like they are very adamant about getting out there. All right, on the left, you can look at average savings of a commercial project, and on the right is a breakdown of the average residential savings. Obviously, when you're looking at these, projects can be so different, it's kind of hard to nail down a number, but the point is there is a savings for the community and there's a savings for the builder. To summarize, LEED is internationally known, it's broad, it covers a variety of buildings. The FGBC is Florida focused. The NGBS is residentially focused, making it easier for applicants to obtain. And the Energy Star home certification is focused on energy efficiency and is applicable to a wide range of categories. So that's kind of your crash course on green building certifications. Thank you for your time and attention.
That was very good, thank you.
Well, that's different than anything I got when I spent months
Right.
trying to find out.
Exactly, yes. That was
Thank you.
excellent, thank you for your time and effort in that.
Well, I do have a question. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
do we have any questions?
I do. You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
So, that's all well and good, but how do we in Tequesta make, so the developer or the homeowner can they can go down that path
Anybody can
on
do
their
this.
own. So, are we thinking of putting that in our code somehow, that we allow it, or that?
That's part 2 of the presentation, Tom.
The incentive.
Part-
That's part 2.
Oh.
So we figured we had a lot of other presenters here today and a pretty full agenda, so we're kind of breaking it up into kind of 2 parts. So this was the primer on this. The next one we'll come back with kind of what other places do to incentivize green building and maybe some ideas that we've got. We do have to talk, we're going to talk to our water department to see if there's some incentives they can provide, and then a little bit more of our building department to see what they can provide. So we will come back with that.
Okay,
Excellent.
perfect. This was
Love it.
excellent,
Yeah.
Meg.
Yeah, it was great.
Any other questions?
Any Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, next up, Steve Parker, Village of Tequesta Tree Code Prohibited Species List.
So I'll just give Steve a quick introduction. He's our village landscape architect. He helps us do plan review when new projects come in. Anytime the village is doing a landscape architect related project, he'll do the design. I think you did all the design on West Drive.
Right.
The state of the new planting plan.
Okay.
So we utilize him, quite a bit. He's got substantial expertise in the field, and the last time the village updated its code related to prohibited species, I think you were pretty instrumental in writing that and kind of rewriting our landscape code. So just thought we'd have Steve come out and give you a little bit of an overview of the invasive species list.
Have at it, Steve. All right. Does everybody have the list that Tom Bradford sent out
I have, yeah.
2 weeks or a month or so ago?
It's attached, it's part
I
of
was
the
gonna pull up the
backup.
invasive species list.
I think specifically we look at trees that are on the village request list. That are not on this FISC list. And then look at trees that are on requested list and not on the list. So it's the two conflicting issues of trees, sort of go through them and figure out which ones we should either add, subtract, or request on list. Ultimately, that's what we want to get to is what should be on the request on list, specifically in the realm of trees. I think we're focused on.
We're just pulling up Tom's list that he sent out, so you can look at
Should I
it.
start or wait for that?
Just, we'll have it up in 1 second.
So, one question. FISC, that is the list that is for, or was developed by UF?
It's the
I've-
four invasive species.
I don't think so.
No? I thought there was a list.
IFIS has a list, and then FISC is a separate organization that has its own list.
Ah, gotcha.
There's two different lists.
All right.
Oh, there it is. We could probably start there at the top and work our way down. So maybe just following the common names on the right. So green is on both lists. So that, since there's consistency there, we just keep the greens. And blue is on the village Tequesta list, but not on the FISC list. So there's two there, you can see the lofty fig and the banyan. The lofty fig is a tree similar to our strangling fig. It's a non-native. It typically starts on the crotch of the tree and the roots eventually form and become crop roots. So that tree I would still recommend being on the list of prohibited trees in Tequesta. There's other opinions on that matter, but as a non-native, we do have the strangling fig that's a native, that's the preferred species. Apparently this was a tree that, because it wasn't native to the area, it wasn't really pollinated until this non-native wasp appeared that it skipped from pollinating it. Now it's started to proliferate and become somewhat invasive. So that's the story of the lofty fig.
And I think it's also important to mention too, people, if you have an existing lofty fig, you don't have to remove it, correct?
Correct.
So somebody could still maintain an existing lofty fig or banyan. It's just that when people are coming in planting new trees, the code would be encouraging to plant a strangler fig rather than the lofty fig.
Is that the, can I ask a question, is that the only point of relevance for this list, is new construction, new projects or renovation projects?
Essentially, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were some that were maybe some invasive trees that were worse than others and actually had to get removed within a certain time period.
Right, it could come up in two ways on new construction, where you have an existing tree that's on the prohibited list, and then you have to make that decision about if you have to take it out or keep it, depending on the situation, which is kind of the case. But typically, I would review the plan and say it has to be removed. If it was proposed, obviously, on a plan, which is very rare, you say, well, this is on our list and you can't propose it.
Steve, do you have a microphone there? Because I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh,
There
sorry.
is no microphone for the podium.
There's no mic? Okay.
Would it be easier to have him come here?
There is one, it works.
They
Would
said
it be easier to
that,
have him come sit, maybe just sit and talk into that mic?
do you want to sit next to me?
Switch with me.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve.
Here, come sit. So you can also, this mouse, you can scroll on your,
Sitting right next to you?
no, honey, you're just here, sorry.
Okay, well, I feel like I'm in the commander's chair.
Okay. Big
Nice.
responsibility back there.
So, did anybody have any comments regarding the lofty fig to start?
No.
Okay, the next one is the banyan, and that may be a little bit more of an issue. That was on our list because it just becomes a massive tree and, aggressive root system and so forth. It's also non-native. I know there are a few banyans existing in Tequesta, especially over by First Presbyterian Church. I don't think they would ever be an issue, and there would ever become an issue as far as removing them or asking to remove them. This tree, I would certainly not want to see it being proposed on a new project, especially a commercial project where there's not a lot of room and you'd have root systems damaging parking or sidewalks and so forth. So I would recommend that it stay on the list. There could be qualifiers that if it's existing in certain areas, specifically the one near the church and that one street in that area there, that would remain in perpetuity.
Steve, I've heard rumors that there are people in Bay Harbor and or members of the Presbyterian Church that are of the opinion that that banyan tree that's pretty much at the entrance of Bay Harbor should be designated as a historic tree. So my question for you is, would that be very strange to have a historic tree that we actually end up not allowing?
Right. Definitely a conflict of interest there. Yes, I agree. So we could pull it off the list of prohibited trees.
Mhm.
But it certainly would be something when I review plans, I wouldn't want to see someone proposing a banyan.
Right.
Right. It is historic. I mean, how,
It's been there
the
forever.
historic kind of gives it its ticket to stay.
But not something that you want to plant these days.
No.
Yeah, that's true.
No, the ones
That's
that
true.
exist are
There's
there.
the one down at the end of River Drive.
Right.
They kept it when they did the new build,
construction.
Steve, all the way on that's the north end, right?
very end.
Mhm.
Yeah, very end. They
Big
kept that
tree.
one, it's beautiful.
Massive.
But it's massive,
Yeah.
so.
I can't believe it hasn't blown out their seawall, but it hasn't.
It has it,
Yep, still there.
It's a historic tree.
yeah.
Then the last tree that was on the Village of Tequesta's list, but not on the FISC list, were the eucalyptus species. And I would still recommend keeping it on the prohibited list. For a number of reasons. It's fast-growing, brittle branching structure. It's highly flammable. Leaves are somewhat toxic. And it does draw a lot of water out of the soil. And it's just really high water usage type plant or tree.
I have just an unrelated question. Is the melaleuca related somehow to the eucalyptus?
It is, yes.
That's it.
Okay.
And they're both Australian trees.
That's not banned on the, FIS,
The eucalyptus?
yeah,
Yeah, surprisingly, it's not.
what? I thought that was
Yeah.
invasive that had to be removed. Huh. Yeah, I agree.
I read an article that farmers in northern Florida are planting them regularly as a wood source. And I think that might have been why FICS allowed it to stay. But
Okay.
that's just a vague, and I was putting that all together, I would check and say, well, what kind of tree is that, and blah, blah, blah. That's when I read that, but, I don't know with positivity that that's why they don't have it on their list.
Yeah, it could be. How do I scroll down to the,
It's underneath your paper.
oh,
You want to go all the way down to?
oh, I think, maybe go up a little bit. And go down. Okay, I guess keep going down. Actually, those are all, okay, yep. Yep, might as well go to this list here. Yep. That's it, perfect.
You sound
Thank
like me when I'm trying to get my husband to hang something on the wall.
This is right,
Right?
furniture moving, right?
Right.
Okay, so now, so they're just those 3 trees that were on Village of Tequesta, not on FISC. This is a much longer list. These are the FISC trees that are not on Village of Tequesta. And we can certainly add some of these onto our list. So starting with the,
And Steve, one way that I think we've talked about doing this is just saying that anything that's on the FISC list that's not on the village list is considered a prohibited species list, because this is getting updated every year. That way we're not having to go through and have this discussion every year with the council and update our code every year. It's just whatever FIC says is prohibited becomes prohibited.
Well, but
And then the additional.
right? Does Steve agree that?
yeah, there's a couple oddballs on the list. Maybe we'll just cover those. I can understand the rest of them being on the list, certainly understandable, but there's maybe a couple here that but you may agree, but we might as well discuss them.
One way we could also craft it is to say that the village landscape architect has discretion to allow something that he thinks, that's on the FISC list that he thinks is actually worthy. So some of these things he's gonna say, I don't think should be on there. He'd have some discretion to say, yeah, you can plant that.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. Well, the 2 that I noticed that may be questionable, but I've seen them on the list for a long time, have been the glossy privet, Ligustrum lucidum. The Chinese privet, Ligustrum sinensis, I can understand, that's very invasive. But the Ligustrum lucidum is used quite a bit in South Florida, and it's a street tree on Indian Town Road and alternate A1A.
Which one again is it called? What's it called?
It's Ligustrum lucidum.
Oh, ligustrum, okay.
There's a couple of varieties.
There it is.
There it is.
Wait. Oh, wow, yeah.
So the sinensis, I can understand, that is very aggressive and prolific, but the Ligustrum lucidum, I'm a little surprised it's on there, but I've seen it on there for a while now, and I've still specified it on projects, so I don't know if,
You're in disagreement.
I'm in disagreement with that one.
Okay.
Did they say why?
I think they've kind of lumped it in as a aggressive invasive plant.
Fast growing,
Yep.
yeah.
But I have one in my yard, and I've never seen it actually spread at all. And I've had it for 20 years. So I've got first-hand experience with that. The second one is the sapodilla. The sap is originally a base for chewing gum. According to the University of Florida, it had said no invasive potential. People really aren't specifying that tree very much, but that's the only other one that I would question.
So you're in favor of keeping sapodilla off the prohibited list, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And then you can see, I mean, there's the guavas. People use guavas still quite a bit, but they are invasive. I was in a site one time when I was walking through a guava thicket. They were so dense and spread so much. Oh, the last one, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Kudzu is fair game?
No, that needs, no. Oh, yeah, wow, it's not lit, it's not, no.
Where?
Oh, if it's on the list, it's considered invasive and prohibited.
Oh, if it's on, okay.
If it's on the
All
list,
right,
yeah.
all right, I'm sorry.
The highlights just mean to have different meanings.
It wasn't highlighted.
The highlights
See
have
the
different
colors
meanings, yeah.
My bad.
The last one there, the Vitex, the beach Vitex, chase tree, even though it's called chase tree, that's actually more of a beach plant and a ground cover. So if you just wanted to focus on trees, it should be on the list though, because it is invasive and it pushes out, beach sunflower and railroad vine and so forth.
Railroad vine is that, Steve?
That's native.
Right, so what is, I'm confused then, the Vitex is
Oh, the Vitex is a non-native. It looks a lot like
not like it.
A lot
right?
like it, but it's a non-native. So that's the summary of the list, and I think it's good to talk about it. And it sounds like we'll just update and just expand the prohibited list and include a lot more of these plants.
I have a general question. Do we have any sense of how often trees and these non-tree species come up in our compliance code evaluations?
That
That someone's trying to plant something like this?
someone's proposing a prohibited
Proposing.
tree.
Yes,
Does it come up?
It's very unusual.
it's very unusual.
Very unusual. Yes, I think most people, especially larger firms like Cutler and Herring and Gentile and Associates, that's where I see most of the plants coming from. They know our list inside and out, so they're not proposing any of the prohibited plants.
Okay, thank you.
At individual homeowners, I don't review those plans, but that's a possibility where some of those are maybe proposing guava trees or.
Well, per the game plan that Jay outlined about how we would get from here to codification, then I would say we accept all of Steve's recommendations so that the certain trees that he specified don't become prohibited. And then, and I know I'm on the agenda for this same subject, but we can kill two birds with one stone here. The only other thing that we as a board need to talk about is, since today's focus was trees, do we want to look at the FICS list of non-trees that they prohibit to see if we want those to be included in the Tequesta code?
Like the flowers and.
Pardon?
Shrubs and.
Yes, vines, shrubs, grasses,
Yeah,
so forth,
absolutely.
yeah.
I thought that's what the second list was.
Yeah.
The
That's a-
non-trees.
That's a long list, I think, right?
Well, I can't remember if I had both trees. Wait a minute, trees are,
I think
one
maybe
of the
the
colors means it's a tree.
right. Yeah, and the ones that don't have a color, those were
So
non-tree.
this is the totality of the list, but we.
Yes.
But we've only focused on trees.
Trees today, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
The only one that's highlighted that was not a tree was that last one, the Vitex rotundifolia. But the rest that are highlighted were all trees that we looked at.
Is it to assume that the non-trees that aren't highlighted are in alignment?
I
Two
didn't
lists.
study those, but I'm sure most of those would probably, I'm sure most of those would probably make sense to be on the prohibited list. And they're probably more of a problem than the trees almost, except for, of course, the real bad ones like Brazilian pepper and Australian pine. But a lot of these ground covers are really aggressive and really bad. And
So this entire list is prohibited species, and then the highlights are the FISC and your recommendations.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tequesta
Now-
versus
okay,
FISC,
Gotcha.
yeah.
All right. And it's in totality, trees and plants?
Well, that
Yes.
list is both.
Okay.
But today, I think the
Right.
yellow,
Studying the
I
trees.
forget if
Right.
the yellow or green was focusing on trees only.
Right, okay.
And then just FYI, everyone, you have this, but you see the URL to the far right in blue, that'll take you to a photo section or a Google search that'll show you photographs of the plant. And I think on that last one that Steve was talking about, when I did that, I couldn't tell whether it was a tree or a or a regular old plant, but that was months ago, so I don't really remember. But anyway, I think and you tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, but maybe the thing we do today is we record Steve's recommendations. Then at another point, we come back to the EAC and we look at the non-trees and make sure we're okay with, recommending those be prohibited or whatever. And then at the end of that meeting, then we'll have a list that's eligible to be taken forward to council for their consideration. Does that sound like a plan?
I think that's a fair motion. So, yeah, a motion to make a ruling on the trees list for today and review the plants, shrubs, et cetera, at a subsequent meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Does the motion include following Mr. Steve Parker's recommendations?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate
all right,
it.
thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Steve.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Next up is Nick from Reef Arches. Nick Bourdon? Bourdon?
Yeah, Bourdon.
Bourdon. Nick is the co-founder and director of environmental development at Reef Arches.
And he will be here in 3 minutes. Is there a magic wand?
I have it.
Or is it- All right, magic wand. Super cool. All right, so hi everybody. I'm Nick Bourdon. I'm the co-founder and co-inventor of Reef Arches. So what we focus on is nature-based solutions, living shorelines, and oyster restoration. It's kind of fun. So a little bit about us. We're actually a spin-out from Hedrick Brothers Construction. And so Hedrick Brothers is about 200 employees, 45 years old, and we're a seasoned contractor. So I heard about what you guys are doing through Keith Rossin through MANG, because we actually did a partnership together, and I'll explain why. So our goal really at Reef Arches is to focus on a couple things. Marine enhancement, we also focus on living shorelines, educating people on what that is, and also protect your shorelines, right? So even if you were, for example, remove invasive species, that's great, you remove them, but trees also supply roots, and that kind of holds your soil together. So that's a classic example. Or you get erosion from oakweed. You may have seen on the Jupiter in the lighthouse. You get erosion from rain, hurricanes. So that's what we did. So instead of throwing rocks and just saying, hey, here's a rubble and a mound of it, here's an actual solution to create habitat as well. So what is the arch? So it is a pretty cool product. This is our 50-pound unit that I sell. And the one in the screen there is actually through our manufacturing site in Fort Pierce. That's 1,200 pounds. So we make them, and we also have it stacked like Pringles. So I could basically take this unit here, place it on top, and I could easily ship it, put it onto a barge, and transport it. So that makes it very quick, very efficient. And then just like the image there with the arrow pointing, actually if it's possible, make it just scroll slightly or just take underneath it. Thank you. So there's a plate that connects all of our arches together like Legos. So that's a very quick way to address erosion
horizontally or vertically. So we can put this on any shoreline, inshore or offshore. So we've been around for about 2 years, and we actually have made some pretty big strides in the industry. We partnered with a very large national distributor called Ferguson. So they focus on waterworks, and they just moved into a green stormwater treatment. So we actually did an exclusive arrangement with them. They provide engineering services, and we supply the product. So that's pretty exciting. So now we can help all of Florida coastlines on the East Coast and on the West Coast. So Keith and I are able to tag team together on this. So we basically tailored a solution for each environment. We also did a strategic partnership with a mining company to supply local sand. So that way we can now address all Florida coastlines, especially after the hurricanes. So what can you use reef arches as? Well, you can use it as a living shoreline. That's been a growing topic, especially for resilience. And when we started in the early days, Keith and I got together and we thought, you know, you really could just combine mangroves and arches. And the way you do that is you plant the mangroves behind and the roots will grow through. So once you have your prop roots growing in, now you've created this entire Iron Man suit for your shoreline. You've created an attraction. You've created a new snorkeling location. And it brought a lot of good publicity, especially in this location too. So because it's a growing need, we were able to pretty much provide a turnkey solution. And we're local, right? We're based out of West Palm. So another solution is to use reef arches as a breakwater. So that's exciting. If you need a product just to take the punches, no problem. It actually slows down the wave energy. So we've got some cool physics I can show you on how it works. Well, thank you. So like I mentioned before, depending on the location, depending on the type of wave, we just cater it. We can stack it high or keep it to one stack. And once that system is stacked together, it weighs around 3,600 pounds. So that's great because you don't want this, being thrown around during a hurricane. So our last project, Hurricane Milton went through it. It didn't move. That's great. Those have been tested. Now with that, we also do continuous testing. So if you click that video, I think there's a player.
Dead center.
Oh, there it is.
So we actually do continuous testing, especially in the lab. So it's called wave tank testing. It's basically a glorified bathtub. So you basically just start splashing water through it, and then you measure the waves in the front of the arch and then behind it. And then we're able to show here that we do slow down wave energy. That's really important because I can put this in front of the seawall. So now you can actually lengthen, the idea is you can lengthen the length and then the length of the seawall. Because if you get all your sand getting thrown out, you just put this in front instead of riprap. I don't need to go from a barge. I could just go from a truck, lift it, and drop it. Now that's cool. And then you can put all your habitat through it. So all your fish will be able to cater, create their ecosystem underneath it. And you can have a marine light that goes through. You basically have an aquarium in your backyard. Kind of great.
I'm sorry, one real quick question. The picture that you showed looked like 3 just like that.
Yeah.
But you just picked that up. You said it was 3,600 pounds?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Did I get that wrong?
Yeah. So that's our scaled down model to fit in the tank. Those are 50 pounds.
Okay.
So we have 2 models. We have our 50-pound units we sell that are half a ton product, and we're going to scale up to 3.5 tons later. So, but for this one, because everything's scaled appropriately,
Understood.
just take it. Okay, so now proof in the pudding, like where has this been done before? So while we are a 2-year-old company, this was our first project we did in March. So we literally had a client come up to us and they said, Nick, I give you 60 days, no permits, and I don't have a barge. And you need to manufacture it, install it, and deliver it. Can you do it? And I said, sounds great, that sounds reasonable. So we did it, and we were able to actually produce the results you see already 3 days later. This is in Palm Bay, Florida, in the Indian River Lagoon, and it's a micro-tidal zone, meaning it's only a 4-inch tidal swing. It's also a Native American site. It was a shell-knitted and from the ice tribe, so they needed a way to protect the actual site. They didn't have a beach, and everything was damaged from Hurricane Michael previously. So our job was to basically make a breakwater. So as you can see, 3 days later, the physics is working. We trip a wave, kind of like a waiter. You just trip the waiter, the food spills. You trip the wave, the sand spills right onto the shoreline. So magic wand. Make it turn.
She acting up?
Did-
Ready?
It's okay.
Excuse me, did you
Yes.
say that you were able to do that without a permit? Or they just
No, no.
gave you had your your 3-month timeline to get it done, including permitting?
Including permitting.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we definitely have permits. We actually complied with a FDEP permit exemption. Anytime there's bank stabilization less than 500 feet owned by the city, it is eligible for a permit exemption. So we have an FDEP exemption, and then we got an Army Corps permit within that time frame. So we were able to get everything done. The stress level was through the roof.
Yeah.
But we did it, so we're super excited. We can go to the next slide and see if I can. So you can see how we transformed the shoreline very quickly. So myself and our counterpart is there with with the lady, she's a scientist. So she was able to measure all the sand we collected, the environmental impact, the seagrass that we've grown naturally, and all the oysters there. So this is huge news.
I got you.
Okay. So 18 days later, post-deployment, we have contact. Awesome. We literally grew the beach 10 feet out. That's insane. So 18 days, now we're forming habitat. And then, next slide, 45 days out, we're able to show already 16 inches thick of new beach, 10 feet out, 90 feet wide, and growing. Notice here for the water nerds like me, there's no scouring, meaning the sand isn't getting lost. The water is actually moving through. If you use rock, if you use riprap, you actually create a problem. You create what's called crenulation, or like bite marks on your shoreline. Because the water is gonna run behind the path of least resistance, it will run behind that rubble, and you'll actually create more problems. That's why with our solution, as water can move through it, you keep the sand. We keep the waves away from their homes, we keep the waves away from, in this case, archaeological site. So as of July 26th, you can see already, we grew land. That's insane. Like that has never been done before. So we were able to showcase that, and we thought, hey, well, we got a new beach. I know a guy that could grow mangroves. This could work. So then next slide, we thought, well, let's just put some mangroves behind it. So that was my very nice graphic drawing. Next slide. And mangroves, so with MANG, they're able to kind of consult us on how mangroves should be placed. MRC was actually the one that supplied the mangroves for this particular project. And you can see how they took their mangroves and were planting it. So next slide. We basically created a community, right? That shoreline was absolutely trashed from the hurricane. Now we're able to build a beach, build a living shoreline, and create a whole new value-add attraction, protecting the archaeological site. So already you can see our mangroves were planted. And then unfortunately, 2 days later, we had Tropical Storm Debbie. But they were still there, which was great. So it totally worked. And that's because we now show that the reef arches did in fact keep the mangroves alive. And it wasn't because of the roots, they were literally just placed there. So we were super excited. And we had a control group or an area where planted mangroves, no protections. I mean, they're stressed, they're not gonna. So the ones behind our new beach, our new breakwaters, in fact did. All right, so I mentioned earlier how we deployed. They didn't have a barge. That's cool. So how did we do it? So actually, we invented a whole new way. So
Go-kart.
Go-kart. So we basically took it from a flatbed. I mean, it also looks super cool, right? Because in nature, it's always about curves. It's never corners. So we thought, all right, let's put this honeycomb design, this bee-inspired structure, put it on our flatbed, and then next slide, we took our lull, we just lift it, and then next slide, I give it wheels. We basically make a go-kart. And we thought this would work because what's a shoreline if not a giant ramp? And so next slide, we launched it. We just straight up throw it down the hill. And if you play the, we safely roll it down the hill, I would say that. So there's nothing confirming or denying that we were sitting on top of it. So, but in this video, we basically showed a whole new, really medium to deploy. So there's no gas, no electricity, just straight physics. There wasn't any seagrass in this scenario, so we basically just said, all right, just 4 guys, and we manually pull that. So it takes about 5 guys to move 1,200 pounds, apparently. It was brutal. We moved all 37 units in 4 days. All this to say, please have us use a barge. Please. That would be good. And then next slide. Well, how do we lift it? I give it wheels. How do I take the wheels off? So we make a giant seesaw using the preceding arch as a fulcrum. We lift it. We then now suspend the arch, take off the wheels, slide it, and then connect it together, like with Legos. Now you created effectively a brand new breakwater system, no gas, no electricity, and we got featured on Brevard News, South Florida Business Journal. We were actually able to pick up even exclusive arrangements with the distributor, and even other resorts in the Caribbean were like, Nick, can I grow corals on it? I said, yeah, you can grow corals on it. We were able to grow it in our handy dandy inserts. So in these inserts, you could actually put oysters on it, and then we place the oysters right on it, like so. So now you could actually have it clean water. That's great, everybody likes clean water. But if you don't have an area to hang it or place these, you could just take our larger units, put the oysters on it, and you can place it right on your seawall, like so. So now every member in the community, especially in Tequesta, could just say, I could just install this. I could have an impact. I could help my community in Rossin. And next slide. So talking about those oysters, we're able to find, I really wanted to make a way to grow our aquaculture industry. So we actually work with oyster farmers locally in the state of Florida. And we actually partnered with Treasure Coast Shellfish. If you just go next slide. We actually take our giant inserts, and that's placed already in our 1,200 pound units. So you basically could have an instant water quality enhancement. So rather than waiting for those oysters to grow, we have a method to do that. So 4 months, we're able to grow oysters. That's a big deal. So the way we do it is with Treasure Coast Shellfish, we say, hey, we will pay you in order to take our inserts into your oyster bags. They float them next to the existing oysters. The oysters spat, like the baby oysters, grow on here. Now it's ready to be set. So now I can take those oysters and then place it on a wall. Instant read. So you don't have to wait, you have an instant value. Next slide, please. This is just more like a beauty shot of all the great habitat we had when we deployed our 1,200 pound units. We got oysters, barnacles, mussels. I wouldn't eat those oysters, the water was kind of but eventually we want to. So we want to clean up the water so that now you have your whole new industry. Next slide, just another picture, another snapshot of where the oysters were growing. This is in a different section. Next slide. So that's everything about myself and Reef Arches. And then if you go towards the appendix, we also have the slides for next one.
Yeah, this text it on. Can you just add these really quickly? It'd be easier this way. So,
Yeah. You'll see the giant green slide with that name on it. The next one.
Giant green slide.
It'll be, if you scroll maybe 4 or 5 slides. Yeah, that looks great.
All right.
Perfect.
Keith, before you go, is there any questions for Nick?
Yeah, so the one, case that you depicted here was only 1 layer. Have you experimented with doing the 2 and/or 3 layers high?
Yeah, actually I have around 28 leads, give or take. And actually we're getting spec'd into the engineering company to make a breakwater in this fashion. So I'm literally doing proposals for 6 different breakwaters rather than riprap. Because the municipality is saying, we want to get more attention for what we're doing in resilience, and we want to be seen as the, one of the municipalities to showcase this.
Sure.
So we have those. We also did the wake tank testing. We're also looking at West Coast. We've been approached for Louisiana, South Carolina, and what's that state? Georgia. So
that one
yeah, the one that's right above. I hope no one's a Bulldogs fan. But,
That's great.
I have a question. The example you showed us was in a microtidal environment.
Yes.
Do you have an example in a, regular tide cycle versus microtidal?
No, not with our 1,200 pound units. We have 3 grants. We got funded through DEP. We got $1.5 million from it, and that's where we're using the 1,200 pound in Boynton Beach, and we have 2 other projects scheduled for Sebastian and Town Marine Land. It just takes a while for the permitting, so really all we have to show to the engineers is, does our map work? So we take the wave tank data, we take our case study, we submit it to them, and that's plenty of information for them to show that this works. They just have to measure the wave height. So if it's like a 2-foot, deep area, you get a 1-foot wave or 2-foot wave from those, they say, okay, you can measure that pretty easily.
So it's done in the lab, but not out in the field yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Because and it's pretty difficult to have every case scenario because you have different slopes of your shoreline, then you have different wave heights, and then you have different activity coming in. Right? You could have boats, you could have fetch for wind. So there's all these dynamics at play that even if I had every scenario, the engineer would still require me to send them the wave data, and they're still going to know.
You go ahead, Michelle.
Just a quick question. What is that material? A composite of some sort?
Yes, I was so excited. I get to know that about concrete. So this is a pH neutral concrete mix. So it's 7.5, and the reason why you want it neutral is so that it's more friendly for the oysters. If it's acidic, then the oysters won't grow. If we're just trying to use this pan, you just take the hits from the waves, then we use Portland, just typical Portland cement, and we pour it right in. If we're trying to grow corals, then I use calcium sulfate aluminum, which is CSA concrete. I use around 30% of that, and then 70% is masonry sand. And then I reinforce it with basalt fibers, and I also have that stainless steel rod where I attach the wheels to. So that's more for the
So it's not plastics.
new,
That's good. Okay.
you don't touch plastic.
Yeah. And a second quick question is for aesthetics. How, in the example that you had, it extends or protrudes up above the water line. Is that what the mangroves could eventually all get in there and hide all that?
Yes.
Okay.
Because, and that's a really good point. So we do 2 things for the aesthetics. If you don't like the curves of the arch, then we actually change the color using natural pigments like ochre. And then you can't have any mangroves to grow unless you have some sort of lagoon effect, right? You need to have calm waters for mangroves to grow. You need some sort of sand. So over time, the mangroves will completely envelop this completely, and this will be hidden. You gotta give the mangroves a chance to grow.
Right. And those roots won't destroy and break down that,
Will the
Over
roots destroy
time.
the concrete?
yeah, over time.
No, over time. Not at all. It's actually, we're trying to create spaces for it to go through it and actually lock it into place. So, and Keith can tell you more about how pop roots work. So I just make the hole big enough for pop roots to go in and keeps it all into place. That way we protect the homes behind it.
That doesn't restrict the growth of the mangrove?
The 1,200 pound units, the honeycomb shape is relatively large, a little bit larger than like the full growth of a prop root. So we're thinking that over time, it's not gonna impact the growth of the mangrove. Even if it hit the restriction point, it would just be a restriction point, and then it would either grow above it or below it. Like if you ever seen like a tree growing through a fence, it kind of just finds its own way. But it has to be very mature mangrove. But the 1,200 pound units, based upon the size of the hole, I'm not too concerned at all about it impacting that. And at that point, your sediment's already kind of like moving into the unit, your oysters are growing, so what it's creating is kind of that perfect scenario for the mangroves to continue to grow through the unit. And so you're creating what we call like our iron wall defense system for the future Florida's coastlines. So it's the ability to actually grab the sediment, have your oyster reef that actually protects your mangrove from getting scoured out. So like, let's say like loss of seagrasses and things have happened over the years, especially in the Indian River Lagoon. Because of the loss of seagrasses, you'll have these scouring events happening during storms that wouldn't happen before because that seagrass is holding down that base sediment. So what we're trying to recreate is actually how we rebuild our shorelines back. These structures will also enable the intensification of the growth of seagrasses in areas by adding structure. You always see an increase in the footprint of seagrass around those areas. Then specifically, even if you just look at some of the projects, the Jupiter Islands right on the south side of US 1 Bridge, or west side, excuse me, those riprap piles or seagrass that's popping up everywhere around that. But that seagrass wasn't there before they put the riprap in, right? So any kind of structure enhances the benthic and fine and growth around it. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the roots damaging or breaking.
Those 3 projects that you got that grant for that are in the regular tidal zones.
Yeah.
When do those projects start or expected to start?
I have to get the grant agreement signed, so we were awarded it. We get 8 months, get the grant agreement signed, then we apply for permits through Army Corps, and then once we get the permits issued, then we can start producing it, so call it a year and a half
Yeah,
change.
okay.
So that's why we only have the wave tank data.
Yeah.
I'm only as fast as my permits.
No, understood. I was just,
But what we are doing to actually increase our projects, we have a lot of private developers that called us. So we're trying to create basically incentives by going to the flood insurance companies. So we say, if you're able to put this in, something is better than nothing. So we can actually show, we can slow down the wave energy. That way the developers say, I get a lower insurance rate putting this in, and I can get my permits quicker, because sometimes you have to protect your mangroves in that area. So we've been exploring that as well. That kind of falls in line with that previous presentation that you made, like how do you incentivize developers to actually be more green. So we're trying to address that from the insurance angle. To say, if you put us in, we slow down the waves, and we protect the asset, thus lowering the risk of claims. So,
Have you guys thought of beach erosion being on an area that you guys?
Trickier subject.
yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, sure.
But if you were to, we have thought about it, that would include the next size up, which is the 7,200 pound
Yeah.
unit. Because anything offshore has to be larger, but there's definitely a lot of hope if we're able to actually push it forward that we would actually be able to do the same thing. We tested small scale what it would look like along the beach with our 5 pound units, and it does build back the beach. So it's actually pretty promising, and you could create maybe some great surf break for some surfers. So yeah, there's a dual sort.
You look at some of the areas like my parents are up at Palm Coast, and they lost the entire road with some of the storms, like it's gone. So and they keep trying to build it back.
Yeah,
going away.
The infrastructure cost on the cities to pump sand in the beach is immense. Palm Beach, the beach would already be gone right now if they weren't pumping it in yearly. So those are factors that we're looking at.
I have also like 7 or 8 different breakwater projects just to protect roads.
Yeah.
Because they said, if I could put this, 30 feet away from my roadway, I don't have to worry about like all that erosion coming through.
Well, think about Flagler County up there in the northeast, because they would desperately need something.
For sure. I mean, I'm
They're trying to build it back right now, and I'm just shaking my head saying that sand's gonna be gone in one more storm.
Probably already on its way being gone a little bit.
it seems kind of silly, like putting ice in it.
But that's a great project, you guys, that's amazing,
Thank you.
very intelligent.
Could you provide just a little context on the big cost? How does that compare to traditional riprap methods?
Yes.
At the end of the day, cost is always a barrier.
Sure. Yeah, so if you were to compare us to riprap, there's a couple other factors. So typically people see, riprap is, a local just rock pile, and it costs me, X number for the rock. But they don't really take into account execution, like you gotta stage it, you gotta pick the rock, you gotta transport it. But in terms of the amount of rock required, my footprint to get my highest peak is much less than it would be for your riprap. So a lot of people ignore the cost for mitigation. So if you have a giant seagrass patch and you put, already a 20-foot footprint, that's a big amount already off the bat just on the footprint. So we're able to reduce that just on this size. So we sell our arches currently at $2,500 per. And they sound like a lot, but it's really not, because we make our savings on speed. So rather than going for, you got these big boulders, you need size boulders and small ones, then you have to place each one. And then over time, you create 2 problems. One, the rocks will roll. And that's it. There's really no maintenance plan for rolling mounds, is what it is. Afterwards, you also create those bite marks on the shoreline, because the water's gonna race behind it. It's gonna take that sand and actually cut deeper. So if someone chooses riprap, they're gonna kind of make a trade-off for the longevity of that shoreline behind it. Whereas with ours, you actually put it in once. If this breaks on the top, it's fine, just take it and just swap it. That's why you want to make it modular. So those are just some other factors to consider. And over time, we're actually reducing our costs. So we're able to, do a sole source with the municipality, and then we could have anybody come in through RFP to install it.
So, Reef Arches is the name you've given this, or do you have like a different thing for it? Okay. I notice when you're doing multiple arrays of these things that I assume the permitting agency is making you have a gap?
Yes.
What's the purpose of the gap?
Yes, manatees. It's a manatee entrapment.
Oh.
Because if you have any breakwater, doesn't matter what you have, as the tide recedes and the manatee's behind it, it needs a place to kind of escape. So the manatee's natural reaction is to run along the structure until it finds a doorway. So every FWC requires every 50 to 75 feet of continuous breakwater must have a 5 to 10 foot gap. The other thing too is you can't have any openings greater than 8 inches. So on the side of the reef arches in that project, we actually put some cattle fence on the side that allows the water to pass through, so get your fish to pass through, but you don't have kids go underneath it, and you don't have manatees or turtles. So that's what we do with the cattle fence. You still have your stingrays kind of move through, but that's how we're required for the gap and the entrapment.
I've seen similar. University of Miami is working with someone that has a similar product, but theirs, if I remember correctly, they actually plant the mangrove into it to begin with. So, but you guys are confident that the mangroves will go waterward over time and then grow into that system that you lay. That's right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for the mangrove question, there's different ways to do it.
All right, I'll do a quick intro.
Yeah, we could jump in, but
No, for the mangrove question, those mangroves are actually mangroves we grew, which is like back in the day that we gave to them, Sea Hive specifically. The reason why just planting them straight into the concrete alone, so the Sea Hive is essentially a giant cylinder, and it does nothing to actually bring sediment in, just as a wall, essentially. So they just stack and stack and stack it, and mangrove grows in. Over time, the mangrove will grow out, but eventually the mangrove will be unhappy in that type of a system. It's not a flourishing system. Whereas with this system, your waves come in, your sediment deposits, you're able to actually capture nutrients as well, and so that's helping to strengthen the mangroves and giving them the proper elevation to grow. So really what we like to see is the ability for natural recruitment to start to happen. We think of the #1 causes for what we're seeing in Tequesta, specifically in the Jupiter Naos project with Supinella. They're working on actually building riprap on those islands right now, and looking at how we actually save those islands that are quickly disappearing from boat wave action, right? That repetitive interval boat wave is one of the #1 causings of mangrove destruction in the state of Florida right now. It hasn't really been recognized as that, but we see it each and every day. And those islands are slowly disappearing, and because when that boat wave comes in, hits the sand, washes it out. So with a system like this, boat weight comes in, even if, no matter what your tidal interval is, whether it's a 4-foot tide, 8-foot tide, the system works all the same as far as how it's going to trap sediment. It's going to trap it at this lip first, and then it's slowly going to build it back. So it's going to build back the shoreline, and then at a certain point, depending on the sediment types, you're going to have different elevation growths, but ultimately the elevation growth should be suitable for either upland, buffer mangroves. You got your whites, your blacks, your reds, they all grow at different elevations. So understanding how that transition comes down, the goal is that, and if you really wanted to, you could plant a mangrove right in the top. If you had it in the right elevation, you could just create a little planter like that. We're actually working on some interesting ideas around that as well, but yeah.
the other thing too with that section you mentioned of that company, it's still a perpendicular surface on sand. You'll still get scouring. So, and they, at multiple conferences, they've actually come up to us and they said, we kind of like it. And could you put it your contours at the foot of ours, right? Because it's still a seawall effectively. So they're gonna still get all the scouring in front, but if you put this in front of theirs, it'll prevent that. That's the notion, so. I mean, we're a contractor. That's what we do.
Well,
But it's great. Glad we have more people in this area.
The other side that is like the plus side of reef arches versus a sea hive is the ability of habitat creation. So you think about the amount of fouling organism space, sessile organisms that will attach to this. And actually, because of its design, when the water moves through it, it creates microcirculation, so it actually helps feed oysters, barnacles, and actually speeds up the growth over time versus a flat wall. It comes in, splashes off. The organisms can't actually feed on the plankton and the floating things that they're actually eating, and bacteria and algae and stuff like that. So it does actually create an amazing, as you can see, within a few months, barnacles and oysters already attaching to the units because of their design, which is really, really big. Like for me, it's one of the big reasons why we started working with them is I saw this product and I was like, oh boy, this is the next.
Any more questions?
Awesome.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you
very
very
much. All
I
right.
only have 2 pictures. I could put a ton in here, but honestly, it's more about answering your guys' questions and kind of moving on from there. So I'm Keith. Oh, perfect. So I'm Keith Rossin. I am the co-founder of a apparel company called MANG. We're an environmental apparel company that plants a mangrove for every product we sell. We've been doing mangrove restoration for 9 years. I'm also the CEO of MANG Consulting Services, which is a spin-off of MANG. And really what we're focusing on is working with companies like Reef Arches on how do we develop future systems for 1, fixing our seawall problem, 2, fortifying our coastlines from hurricane storms and actually being able to rebuild land with products like Reef Arches. But ultimately, how do we add more mangroves into our ecosystems, understanding the benefit that mangroves have for our state as holistically from an economic standpoint, but ultimately how the habitat in our whole life cycle in our oceans actually revolves around mangrove ecosystems. So here's some products. I was actually up here, took this picture this morning, and this is what we call a mangrove planter. So this would actually attach along the seawall, and then below it we actually would have reef arches for habitat creation, as you can see with the nice glowing lights, so it's actually an aesthetic. This is a project that we're currently working on. We have not deployed this yet, so this is literally prototyped. Working with a 3D concrete print company to develop the planter, and then with reef arches, with the accessories on the wall for oyster growth and everything along that. So when I was talking with Brad, he was mentioning how, we're talking about this ordinance and what are the things we can and can't do, and I just really wanted to be here to help kind of guide you guys through the process of my understanding of living shorelines, what we're looking to make Tequesta the tree city, right, of the world, right? So we grow mangroves. We have 35,000 mangroves at our farm in West Palm Beach, and part of what we're trying to do is find more projects, but also being up here in Jupiter now, and Jupiter's actually in Palm Beach County, we have more mangroves per seawall than anywhere. We actually have 65% mangrove shorelines versus our 35%. And if you go down the coast, just to the south of Jupiter, it changes drastically. Pretty much from Palm Beach County, Fort Lauderdale becomes more, it's about 75 to 80% of that entire shoreline is seawalls. And that's a big major issue because when you think about mangroves are that life cycle. So when the leaves fall in the water, bacteria forms on those leaves, phytoplankton feed off of the bacteria, zooplankton eat the phytoplankton, and the larval fish then eat the zooplankton. So mangroves are a critical component to actually reestablishing the snapper grouper complexes on our reefs, because those fish are growing up in our mangrove ecosystems. And then when I first saw reef arches as a product, I was like, this is a great way for us to kind of segue how do we create like green and gray infrastructure that protects existing mangrove ecosystems that are fully mature. You talk about a 25-year-old mangrove ecosystem, specifically like if you think about the Gelona property and how the mangroves are being washed out on the other side of the Narrows there on the west side. And every year more and more mangroves are falling in the water. But what is the cost of keeping that mangrove there versus the mangrove being gone? Immense for our ecosystems, immense for restoration. So that's why systems like this that actually help to rebuild habitat we can take back 10 feet of land, and then the mangroves will naturally regrow, and we'll actually be able to rebuild and actually make a more resilient infrastructure. And so, and then the other option is an option like this, when we have tight corridors where we're working with riparian rights, and we're not have the ability to actually build a living shoreline, because you can't just plant a mangrove along the seawall. There's too much scouring that happens with boat wakes. It's pretty much impossible to get anything to grow there unless you have a really, really calm backwater bay and some nice sloping shoreline. Mangroves need that nice slope, they need the right elevation, and they need an area that's nice and calm to be able to effectively grow along a shoreline, or have some kind of riprap to actually protect the mangroves. So some of the projects we worked on with the county in the past are, they create these arch seawall planters, and they put riprap, and they bring it all the way to the seawall. They bring in sediment and fill, and then we plant the mangrove right in the middle, right? And so those work, and they capture a lot of. They're not really capturing sediment. Sometimes they actually let too much sediment into the systems. Specifically one Monso Park that they did not build correctly, but it's looking hopefully like it'll stabilize. I don't know. Right now the mangroves are being compounded by the way that the sediments move along the shoreline there. So understanding how we build them the right way, and we've seen how they built them the right way in the past. Along Parade Park is a great example where they brought the rock all the way to the wall and didn't leave big large gaps along the seawall. Because what will happen is you have the northerly or southerly winds that will bring sediment along the seawall, and then it will just stack into the planters if they're built improperly. And that's just in certain scenarios, specifically in the lake where we haven't seen that anywhere else. But understanding that, we're able to hopefully help you guys see the larger picture of what there's the right and wrong way to do this kind of, mangrove restoration and also seawall installation, the whole picture. That's great. Any questions? Yep. So this is one of those, what we call seawall, not a seawall here, but one of those adaptation shorelines along the seawall. And so they bring in a bunch of rock, they bring in some fill, and you can't see the edges of it, but the edges are open on this particular unit, which has led for sediments to kind of like pile in one way or pile in another way. Whereas if you were just to build it all the way to the shoreline, your goal would be to actually encase that sediment so you're not seeing that shift. So we've seen kind of the good way and the bad way of doing that type of structure. It's good to have a little bit of flow, but not where it's 6 feet of a gap. You want to bring it as close as you can, maybe a foot at most, and that way you don't have that sedimentation that'll cover mangroves. And so this was a community project right there at Monso Park. We also planted the 4 islands in front of the El Cid neighborhood that are just off the distance here, about 5,000 mangrove trees there. Another one of our local projects here in Jupiter is on the south side of the Jupiter Lighthouse, where Jupiter Inland District put the rock piles to stabilize the erosion there. Every one of those mangroves planted there is a MANG mangrove. So we've built community-based projects around mangrove restoration, and really, we care about educating the community about the importance of these ecosystems and how we restore them. And then Sawfish Island, we planted the mangroves there as well. So we're very familiar with local ecosystems in Jupiter and Tequesta, and we know what we need to do to restore them and bring them back to full health. It's just going to take some green and gray infrastructure working together for us to be able to rebuild what we're losing. And you think about even like, Coral Cove, that whole shoreline there that's slowly degrading over time as well. These beautiful seagrass flats there, all sorts of things. How do we look at, working our way up the Indian River Lagoon and really just building back what was lost over the years from boat wake and just storms and human destruction from seawall building and all that stuff. So that's kind of where we're heading. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. I know we were talking specifically with Brad about ordinance that you guys were kind of working through, and be happy to kind of help to make sense of what is feasible, one for the consumer. So the consumer is your taxpayers who live along the water. So what is replacing the seawall mean? And then if they're replacing the seawall, what mitigation credits are we going to require them to have to actually give back to the environment for the replacing of the seawall? And I maybe explaining that process a little bit so they can understand it a little bit deeper too. And me, if I'm saying this incorrectly too, would be helpful.
Yeah, so I do have some questions. Well, you had a question?
Go start down there.
Start down there. Question? No? I'm not sure about this. So do you have any data that suggests or maybe points to the direction that seawalls or maybe a combination of the arches and mangroves have a protective effect on seawalls?
The data is only off of the one site that we've observed, but we know based upon just how hydrology works and how by slowing down water and being able to accrue sediment, we're able to stop the scouring effect along that seawall. And it's all about understanding the placement of the reef arch for the desired result. So a shoreline that's facing south versus a shoreline that's facing east, you're going to essentially attack it in a different way. And it's understanding how the water is actually moving through that system and where our trade winds are normally coming from and how that sediment's going to build up over time is how we actually bring it all together in the full circle, and is why also make it kind of broad enough to understand how hydrologic flow can actually impact with the right placement, we can actually rebuild. There will be probably certain shorelines that you won't have that kind of flow or that kind of wave energy that's going to help you build that shoreline out. And so you'll see, maybe not the desired effect along that particular shoreline, but as a general whole, we can understand that it's going to help to stabilize that seawall and actually reduce the impact over time of what damages could be done in the replacement time for that seawall as well.
If I could jump
Sure.
in.
Yeah.
Our U.S. Army Corps has a packet called Nature-Based Solutions, and it has about 8 different options of what shoreline or nature-based solutions look like. So introducing, this would be more comparable to what would be like a sill, which is a type of shoreline where it's just slope, some rock, and then some mangrove behind it. So that's how we could actually be pretty comparable to it, and that's how we were able to get our Army Corps permit for the first project. So there's, I could definitely send a link to what nature-based solutions look like, and they show exactly how it's measured and why Army Corps curves it for all their projects really. So.
Mangrove question. Is there such a thing as a pygmy mangrove, a small mangrove,
So
other than it being
we call it
new?
dwarf mangrove.
There is.
And it's not a different type of mangrove, it's just the habitat it's growing in. So like look, I get educated again today, this is great. So we have 4 different types of classifications of mangroves. They're all the same species. Let's call it red mangrove, right? You have your fringe mangrove, you have your barrier mangroves, you have your dwarf mangroves, and then you have your basic mangroves. So your only difference between your dwarf and a riverine mangrove is the habitat it's growing in. So you go down to Florida Keys, go to Bahamas, you see these little tiny mangroves, 25, 50 years old, but they don't get any bigger. Why don't they get any bigger? They're growing on limestone, and they don't have an excess amount of nutrients. That's why the water's blue up there. If the water was dirty like ours, those mangroves would be bigger, right? Because all that suspended sediment is carrying nutrients. Those nutrients help to grow the mangroves, right? So you think about the riverine mangroves in Loxahatchee, nice, tall, robust mangroves, thicker than you can see through. And the reason is because all the nutrients running off the land are actually helping to speed up the growth of those mangroves, and that's why we're in our project along the Lighthouse. Those mangroves, they're growing about twice as fast as any mangrove that we've planted to date. So their speed is from 2 to 3 feet per year reported in general. If you were to do like a barrier island mangrove, it would grow about a foot a year, right? So just because of the accessibility of nutrients and the kind of sediment it's growing in, and all those factors lead to you seeing the big disparity between this little guy here and this guy that's 25 feet, 30 feet in the air.
You probably see where I'm going with this.
I do.
That would be one of the biggest pushbacks in convincing people who live along the coast and have seawalls to put either a living shoreline or supplement the seawall with a solution like this, because they don't want to block their view, right?
This is where we come in with our mangrove trimming knowledge, and we create.
That was going to be my next question, I swear. It's right here.
Yeah, so that's actually an arm of the business we're building right now, and have clients asking for that type of work. The biggest thing is doing it the right way and doing it to DEP's requirements and making sure that we're maintaining health of the mangrove at the absolute most importance. And it's still going to benefit the shoreline. It's still going to do the same things on the low side. The only thing it won't do on the high side is slow down winds and slow down waves above the mangroves. mangroves, right? I'm gonna slow down them. If, let's say, 4 foot width, it's gonna slow down the 4 foot section, but 4 foot above, it'll still knock it down, but it's not gonna do the same as if you had a wall of mangroves, right? The sticks and everything, the branches that it has to move through. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a huge concern for people that live along the water. But the way around it is just trimming it and making trimming more accessible.
Well, I guess my question would be, can the dwarf mangrove live in these Tequesta waters and thrive?
Yeah, so it's not a different species of mangrove. The habitat is very conducive for mangrove growth here, which is a good thing. We don't necessarily want slow-growing mangroves. We want to have fast-growing mangroves because they're going to provide more ecological value to the area. And because we have a river ecosystem. It's a very nutrient-rich ecosystem. In every little pocket, depending on how the hydrology moves to the area, you'll see mangroves along this shoreline growing slower than this one, but it's all just the way that the water moves and brings in sediments and nutrients.
Okay. My
Anyone?
question is, so we're listening to this in terms of shoreline, talking about the ocean side, right? That kind of shoreline and the inlet? No.
No.
So for residential on the Loxahatchee River, seawalls, how does this, a boat owner
Correct.
with a dock,
Yep.
and how does this impact the sand buildup and being able to get access to the boat?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and up the river is very common. So you're not necessarily going to see maybe generally the same kind of sedimentation with this particular product as you would if you were to develop an actual riprap living shoreline, but you'd have to bring in fill for that. But that's an unknown. We don't know how the sediment will compound in the river ecosystem. We can't understand how it's going to compound in more open areas. I do believe that there is potential for it to build. I just don't know what the potential would be. The other side of it is to, you plug up one side and you actually bring in fill. But yeah, my understanding in the river itself is it's one of those areas that we have to do some testing to actually
Okay.
understand how
So it's
sediment
its
will
own
deposit.
ecosystem in
Yep.
there too.
To clarify, do you mean like access for the boat to go underneath the dock? Is that what you mean?
No, to take your boat into the water, if there's a lot of sand buildup, then it's too shallow and you draft, you will hit the
Oh, I
bottom.
see what you're saying. You need
Right.
the dredge. Yeah.
So it really depends how you orient the arch, right? If you're just put a rock out there, you're not gonna get sediment buildup.
Right.
It's not a sediment magnet at all. We had to really position it in that scenario. We had to position it in such a way where it was close to shore and it was going up,
Mhm.
right? So that's where it's a place where the sand was able to be captured. If you're just putting this underneath a dock just to have some structure, just to bring some more oysters and some more habitat, absolutely, you would get a DEP, deluminous permit. It's around a $50 permit, and then just throw this underneath. So you're not gonna have like sediment and just a massive buildup.
Yeah.
That's not what it would
The
do.
main goal is to just protect the sea, or to, let's say we wanted to create suitable habitat for mangroves to grow along the seawall, we would place them very close to the seawall itself, and in hopes that they will build up sediment, which there's a lot of suspended solids in the river itself, so there is a good chance it will build up sediment, and depending on the way that we position them in regards to the flow of the river.
Well, correct, if your seawall is here, right, if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you put the seawall right up against it, then yes, you would see, the hope is you get the sediment. But if you're like at the end of your dock and you just want some structure,
No, I'm talking about at the seawall.
Okay.
Because if you wanted,
Mhm.
if we're encouraging residents to consider mangroves and things on the seawalls in the river because of the wave action that just keeps reverberating back and forth, and to create something where it could be a living area for our native fish and nursery, basically.
yeah.
And if you install one of these up against a seawall in the river, will it create that sediment buildup such that you would not be able to launch your boats?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's something we would have to
Yeah, so,
consider.
so the seawall's like this, your dock would go out, and typically your boat is at the end of the dock, right?
Right.
So you would put these at least in close proximity, if not very, very close proximity to the seawall. That sand is gonna be built up between that and the seawall.
And not.
And
on
it's
the other
not
side.
going to go out, you know,
Once there's a drop off point past this, that it will only build sediment up to a certain level, and then it's going to do what it's always done, which is wash through. I mean, you have certain areas, I'm sure, that fill up with sediment regularly anyways without any structure. Those areas are still gonna be the same. You know,
Right.
it's not going to change those areas that, you know, the backwater canals and creeks that, you know, have drainage that actually brings more sediment.
And then to encourage mangrove planting in that area, then that comes back to our question of how high and all that business.
Yeah.
How much are you allowed to trim the mangroves a year?
So let's say like we planted mangroves, you can trim them 25% at a time as far as their like height down, but you can't start trimming them until they're 6 feet, and then from 6 feet you can keep them maintained. So you can't trim a mangrove at 3 feet, but a seawall generally is much higher. I mean, you may have a little bit of mangrove going above, but
Not like a
it's not
wall.
gonna be.
Where does that 6
Is it-
feet start? At the
Yeah.
root base or at the height that it started? If it grew up top of that structure or on the,
It would start from wherever the sediment root base is, so it's from the ground up. So whatever is exposed at that time. you do
so if you
trim.
pop one on top, then you've elevated your 6 feet up, okay?
Yeah.
Or if you have your mangrove planter, you can still lower it, right, that 3D printed one, you just lower it down plus 6 feet, and you could always accommodate it, because we don't want to block views either, right? You could always just account for it, just where you start your initial origin, so.
Yeah.
Looking for selling points for.
Yeah.
the-
No, it's flexible, we can
Logs
maintain
actually.
it, so you gotta have the selling points for sure.
Do you say they start at 10 feet though?
So if it's past 10 feet, you can't trim it.
It could be professional.
You can't trim it until you leave the canopy after 10 feet.
Oh.
Yeah, but that would take a long time for someone to miss. a mangrove.
Can't go on vacation
And
too
I'll
long.
love that.
Yeah, depending on but yeah.
And I have, and Michelle, this is to you, what about discussing this at our, for about the ramp?
I had that in my thought, yeah.
Sidewalk, neighbors.
I have a thought. How can this board help you two guys in your operations? And specifically, do you need a place in the river to test?
I was thinking the same
Yes.
thing.
You need a place to showcase people what can be
We
done.
might have
and-
that place.
And say like.
We agree. I agree that you do, and that would help the village as soon as they have finally adopted the living shoreline ordinance. This would help people to understand
See it, breathe
ways
it,
and
feel it.
means and
Yeah.
see the whole thing.
Live case study.
We can help build those PR materials around what's the benefit versus not doing it, and those materials are gonna essentially be, do you like fishing? Well, there'll be a lot more fish in railroad structures like these because.
Like
these
for
structures are gonna-
example, Tequesta Country Club has a boat dock area, and they have 2 pocket parks that are on the river. I have no say in what I'm about to say. But that could be a place to test,
It
because,
is
you know, they have waterfront that may have erosion issues, and I don't know, but that one,
So I will say, I think there's 3 of us, right?
Yeah. we
3 of us live in Tequesta Country Club on this board, and the 2 pocket areas currently do have mangroves.
they do?
Yes.
They do, the Northview and Southview
both.
Park
Yeah.
have mangroves, and they have beach area.
And then our dock has a ramp and a little fishing dock that comes out,
We
and
can't put something to build up sand there, we have plenty of sand built up at that one.
Right.
And that would obstruct our ramp.
and people use that as it's a
Yeah.
beach, basically, so.
But as a testing spot, north or south, and to be full transparency, I serve on the Community Association for Tequesta Country Club. So it would be interesting for you to maybe come talk to us to see if this is an opportunity where you could put up a test one at North and South View to see how much more it could build, or you know, if it's out
If you
there.
notice areas where there's been loss of mangroves, this is a great way to rebuild what has been lost. So if there's like particular areas where you've noticed mangroves have fallen in the water over the years and we're looking to this is what that product's designed for, to protect those mangroves that are still hanging in, rebuild it, and then build mangroves back. Would be also another thing to think about.
It's just FYI, Palm Beach County has a natural area set aside on Riverside Drive, just north of
Oh, yeah.
Tequesta Pines. Two, really?
Those two little walkways you go out to the water?
Yeah.
Along Riverside Drive?
Yeah,
That's June.
And one more.
the last time I went there, which was probably about a year ago, they were having erosion issues that I saw. And, you know, in the county, they might say, yeah,
Yeah.
test it,
Yeah.
use it.
Or Coral Cove,
Pardon?
is that a more Coral Cove?
Yeah, Coral Cove too.
Coral Cove. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, the more opportunities for pilot projects, because you could use reef barges in different applications. And then that way, we could say, this is a new standard of resilience that municipalities can adopt. And then everybody could just say, this is how Tequesta was the leader of it. Right, Miami gets a lot of attention for but we're the only other competitor, at least in the backyard, competing against them. And we can say, yeah, but Florida isn't just Miami. There's a lot of other players that could actually create that standard and collect all that PR. It's pretty much a land rush right now for our market. So like there's pilot projects and locations. Oh, that would be great.
Well, when the time comes, I think it may be Thursday night, they're gonna adopt the final reading of the living seawall, the living shorelines, is that true, Jay?
Mm-hmm.
So shortly, assuming it passes on second reading, it would be helpful if you gave us some of those educational type materials so that we could get it through our various Tequesta platforms for communications.
So this Thursday is the proposal's being set forth.
Pardon?
Tomorrow night.
Yes.
So but in that proposal, what is the living shoreline consist of? Like, what is the idea around how you actually build the living shoreline?
Jay would have to answer that.
So, Jay, the community development director here. So, we're really mirroring what Jupiter did with their code, so, requiring riprap and some mangroves, when someone rebuilds a seawall. So, we can only enforce it when someone's rebuilding a seawall, right? So we're just encouraging them to do that, and then we're also, encouraging people to not harden their seawall. So the code almost kind of prevents people from doing that without getting the zoning variance. So if someone has an existing riprap or natural shoreline, they've got to maintain it that way, and they can harden it through a living shoreline.
Well, understood. And if possible, I don't know if it's available, but if you guys could say riprap or other, because if you just specify just riprap, you box out all potential technologies that are available to you. So,
I can pitch that tomorrow night. I'll say like riprap or similar structure, so it'll be kind of a last minute addition, but,
I had no idea, that's how.
because I didn't even in play,
That's good to
but,
know.
Yeah.
We exist, we've been around.
it's a good thing
Yeah.
this meeting was today, not
Right.
Friday.
So,
You might want to take a picture of it and show
Yeah.
them tomorrow night.
sure, that's what for pilots,
Take
you can
one
say
home.
pilot living
Traditionally,
shoreline.
you wanna create a shoreline like this, then, but smaller scale. Traditional riprap bringing in fill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe,
Yeah.
do you have this presentation
do
for
you-
Jay?
I think the council kind of knows
Have it?
what,
Do you have an understanding of how much square footage you're requesting per linear foot of seawall?
it's just 10%, so at initial establishment, 10% of the shoreline has to be comprised of mangroves within 2 years. And if not, then they have to come in and plant 20%. But the idea is that it'll spread.
Yeah.
And we didn't, and I think, like I said, it's mirroring Jupiter's code. We didn't want to force too much because people don't want their entire property
Right.
comprised of mangroves. So, we didn't want to hit them too hard with the stick.
Yeah.
But I do think we're gonna talk next, Brad's got an idea of kind of a carrot, which is how can we actually get people to voluntarily do this, or how can we incentivize them to do this?
I would say it's challenging to bring, like, you can bring in rock, you can bring in fill, but you're talking, 10% of standard seawall length is what, probably 150 feet, maybe 200 feet.
Yeah.
So 20 feet of that, so you're talking a very small planter, or the other options is to go with maybe seawall planters or habitat enhancing units like reef arches, because.
Well, we can play with the mechanics, it's just,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we just need the opportunity to even engage. If it says riprap exclusively, then we can't, if it's riprap or other, then it allows let that, some innovation, some flexibility.
Great.
No, I love it.
Yeah. And then my thinking is with the challenges of just bringing in rock, you're bringing in sediment, which means you're bringing in turbidity barriers. So there's things that, will maybe make that more challenging. And for, I'm trying to think about the cost to actually bring in riprap and soil for, let's say, 20 feet, what that would be.
Well, the whole property has to be riprap.
Oh,
So it's 100% riprap, but 10% mangrove.
Okay.
Good prep work on
Or other.
So no more traditional seawall then?
You can still replace an existing seawall with a seawall, but the idea is that at least create the living shoreline water of the seawall. But if someone does not have an existing seawall, if it's an existing riprap or natural shoreline, the idea is to maintain it in that state and enforce it with riprap.
Or others.
Or other. And mangroves.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And it's just the first, the kind of the first like dip our toe into that one.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we can always amend it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one quick question. Have you tested this in tidal areas where not up against the seawall, but here's the visual I'm thinking of is right in the middle of the Loxahatchee River, just west of the railroad track, where that mangrove island is right there. Has this been tested where the waves would maybe move both sides of those, and is there an opportunity to test something like that? I'm just curious if you've done any projects like that.
You like a spoil island?
Yeah, so there's,
Is that what you mean? Do I understand correctly?
I'm not sure what the name of it is. It's like a mangrove island right in the middle
Yeah,
of
With the
the
riprap
river.
there's an existing mangrove.
Talking where the sandbar is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
sandbars,
river
yeah.
sandbars.
We're actually trying to do that where we could create, so the spoil islands are just dredged material that they just dump in. So, yeah, we're trying to be able to showcase that. Instead of riprap, you just put an arch all the way through. And then, in theory, if you just have a ring of arches, you can also put seagrass there. If it's rings, sand, and then your mangroves, then you create a new habitat and new rookeries. So, absolutely. So we could address it kind of like a peanut island.
Yeah, it's almost like you're creating a new island.
Yeah,
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It would,
Okay, not fun.
There's a lot of wave action there. It seems to me, if I heard you right, like the more wave action, the quicker the rebuild back time could be.
Pretty much. I mean, you would have to measure the sediment transport, but if you have like a ring scenario, that way you're tripping all the sand you put it in, and if you assist it with dredged material, now you have a really quick way to stabilize it. It's easy to get filled, but man, it's hard to move riprap.
Right.
Like a lot of it. So we just go drag and drop them, you can do that.
yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
And if you're just to place like one out in the middle, how the sediment moves around, it's probably not going to trap sediment on its own. When it becomes a full unit, especially if you have in and out tidal, you might see some buildup on either end of it, depending on how you place it, but it's not going to be like, where it just like builds something up.
Are you talking about like a standalone, like
Yeah.
just city or just?
Correct,
Yeah.
put it down.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to,
Yeah, no,
end it because we still have a few things to do here.
Yeah.
But Nick, Keith, I really appreciate you guys coming and providing insight to this.
Please, if either of you guys, my last words on this would be, if you need us for anything, either contact our chair or Jay behind you, and let us know so we can get into action to help you with whatever it may be.
Awesome. Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you again for the opportunity.
All right, so we kind of addressed the tree code
Yes.
during the presentation, so we're good there?
So the game plan would be for us to take this same table, come back, say, a month or two from now, and look at whether we want the non-tree prohibitions that's on fixed to be on the Tequesta code.
Didn't we make a motion on that?
Yes.
Yes.
We did.
Okay.
We did.
Oh, consent agenda, oops, skipping all over the place here. Okay, so would someone like to motion the consent agenda approval?
What are the?
The
April,
minutes,
September, August and September?
August
Yeah.
and September.
Well, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of August and September for this board, and the motion is to approve the same.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we will skip down to new business. Jay, do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, just want to give you guys a quick update on Jupiter Narrows. I know at the last meeting, I think they reached out to some of you guys about applying for a grant. After that meeting, we were able to get like rush consent from our village council to be a co-signer of this grant. And we partnered with them to actually get the grant submitted. So in the time from that last meeting, we've actually applied for a grant from the Florida DEP. It's not a big one, but it's up to $60,000. But the Jupiter Narrows group is actually has agreed to do all the grant writing, all the grant maintenance, and all the funding of the grant. And the village is just kind of a co-partner in it. The municipality has to be the signer of the grant, so we're basically partnering with them on that. But the good thing is we now have a framework to work with them on other grant applications too. So we're going to partner with them and look into Florida Inland Navigation Grant, some other stuff. I know Brad, you sent us a list last year. We're going to evaluate some of those too. So it should be a good partnership moving forward.
Good deal. Thank you. All right, next, Mangrove Restoration Program. I was talking to Jay about this, and I think I'm going to make this homework since we have like 15 minutes. Let's assume that we are able to get money either through the normal budgetary process with the village or a grant, enough to have one personal property, install maybe something like this, but install a living shoreline with or without a current seawall. Okay, so the money part is the most important part, but it's the part we're going to assume that we have. How would this mangrove restoration, or I should say living shoreline program look? This would be something to just sort of think about.
Right.
So living shoreline program. I mean, I'll just throw it out there. I've been thinking about different ways. Maybe it's a localized grant where people who have an interest in either a full living shoreline or a supplement to their current seawall can apply for this grant. Now, again, the amount of money is immaterial. Let's just pretend we have the money. And whether it's a small amount and it defrays some of that cost, or it's a big amount and maybe we have multiple grant winners. And again, this might be pie in the sky, but what I intend in my vision to do is once we come up with a plan that all of us agree on that makes sense, it's pragmatic, I plan to go and see if we can find some money in the budget. So it would be nice to have like a solid program, so it doesn't look like we're just, hey, we want money,
We have a plan.
And if I can just jump in, I've mentioned the idea of the village manager already. He loves the concept, so I think he can be a supporter of this, and then it's just a matter of getting the council on board. One thing for food for thought too is also just think of who would be reviewing the grants. So maybe we even get village council to consent to the EAC being the kind of the committee that ranks them, but then also needing to establish kind of a criteria for how you would score the applications that come in. There's probably 5 different types of ways you can score them, need-based or how much they're committing on their own dollars.
Yeah.
Just think of that.
And really the last thing I want is for it to be like a federal grant where it's just a massive job to fill it out. It has to be somewhat,
User
easy.
friendly.
Yeah, user friendly.
Yeah.
And it would be open to all the residents of Tequesta, although I think a grant submission from someone that doesn't live on the water would probably score pretty low anyway. But I imagine legally we have to offer it to all Tequesta residents.
And when we say Tequesta, because we have Martin County, and no, we don't have any
It'll have to be
municipality.
And who are the primaries that we would seek money from? Would it be Palm Beach County Would it be Loxahatchee River District? Would it be FDEP? would it be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I mean, I think the easiest is just going straight to our council, but we could try and leverage other dollars from ERM and those groups. You know, I think if our council committed an X amount of dollars, we could then go to those other groups and say, hey, we're gonna run this pilot program. Our council's already committed X amount of dollars. Would you also chip in on top of that and become a partner in it?
I mean, that's kind of what Gelona has accomplished.
That's right,
You know,
yeah.
it's like a domino effect.
Correct.
So anyway, if you
Yeah.
could, the next meeting,
Yeah.
we're not gonna have any presenters, so we'll have, you know, time to discuss. And just, you know, what are your thoughts? And really, the nuts and bolts of it too, you know, not just, oh, we gotta have, you know, good education for the people that potentially would submit for this grant. No, like specifics, you know?
Step by step. Yeah.
On that note, can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
It's not on the agenda, but I think last year in February, the EAC chair talked to our council right before strategic planning about things that the EAC wanted to maybe look at the budget for next year. So something like this would be something that we would ask for during strategic planning, then budgeting. Strategic planning starts in March of 2025. So, you know, if we have this idea, and if there's any other ideas that you would want to talk to council about funding, just
Trees.
get that in mind.
Street trees.
All you can get.
Big ones.
Okay, we'll move on. Last one here is, I went to this Florida Resiliency Conference. It seems like it went like last year, but it was in September. Really interesting and eye-opening. And what I did in that staff memo, if you have an opportunity to take a look at it, I'm not going to read through it since we're running low on time here, but these were some of, you know, maybe the high points of some of these talks that I went to during this. Ended up being, for me anyway, a day and a half, because I left this meeting in September and drove straight over, and so I missed part of Wednesday, or I guess I missed all of Wednesday because it was late, but interesting stuff though, especially number 5.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had a
That's scared
incredible,
me.
like it is literally being built now.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
How? As you drive up,
They build it into the asphalt, and it's, you have to have a adapter in your car, and it's just like your cell phone, where you can just sit it on top of those things and it charges.
Right.
Exact same thing.
What's
But
that
you're in
mean?
your car, your EV.
That's crazy.
It's not, it's for, the way they explained it, maintaining the charge on your car. It's not gonna charge up your car to
Right,
full.
you don't lose
Right.
your, while you're
Right.
traveling.
So those miles that
Did
you,
they talk about what the, was it EMGs emitted from?
oh, the electromotive
Yeah.
EMFs or whatever.
EMFs, EMT, whatever the acronym
They didn't
is.
mention anything like that, and it's a good question.
It's
Pacemakers, other things that
Yeah.
come to mind,
Oh,
like.
Yeah, yeah.
Or just general.
I don't know the,
It was
I don't know the
fascinating,
physics
though,
behind it.
to look at that. I had to read
Yeah.
that 3 times. Pass what? As you're passing what? Passing?
Yeah.
As you're driving?
Literally built into the road.
Yeah. And the shoreline.
I've got to believe it's been permitted to death, and
Sure it does.
Yeah.
if there's going to be health impacts, gosh, I'm sure they would have vetted that out.
Years ago, I saw.
Okay,
I saw it.
I would assume then. How about that?
Money talks.
Anyhow, and number 4 as well was kind of interesting. You can get a level 2 charger for your EV in your home for $31 a month. That includes any and all electrical upgrades to your home. It includes all of the planning, all of perhaps the permitting you may need for that extra, whatever, 250 volt.
That require you to have an electric vehicle?
It would help.
We
I
see
don't
that.
know. If you want to pay $31 a month for nothing, you know,
And how long do you have to pay the $31?
good question.
That's
I
interesting
likened
topic.
it to the Go Solar program.
Mm-hmm.
where you pay more now but less later, and you're buying solar arrays for FPNL.
Yeah.
But it could be attractive to some, I don't know. It was
No,
just
they're
interesting.
topics.
Yeah, it was, I
That's
liked
like
it, it was a
Elon
great,
Musk stuff right there that charges you drive.
and number 3, and this will be it, that Cedar Key Shores project, that was really interesting. They put a living shoreline along, I don't know if anyone's been to Cedar Key, kind of that little town area, because they were losing, after every storm, they were losing like parts of the road, and so they did this, and it's still ongoing, but after this presentation in September, I think, was when those hurricanes, or at least one of the hurricanes, glanced or was near Cedar Key. So I am going to reach out to the person who gave this presentation, and she's a PI of the research group that's partnering with the Cedar Key area, and find out how it fared after this storm. That'd be an interesting data point.
What was her name? I read it in here.
I forget.
Barry? Savannah Barry?
Yeah, I don't. She's a relative?
Maybe, yeah. Lived to my husband.
Huh.
So I'll find out.
Yeah.
Warm up your call, maybe.
Or not.
Or not.
All right, so that's about it. Like I said, unless something profound happens, we're going to have 0 presenters next meeting, so we can work.
Okay.
Because it feels like a sort of overload with presentations, and
No,
we don't have the
it's been good,
time.
though. It's been
I
good.
agree, it has
Yeah,
been, it has been.
It's hard to reach out and research when you just don't even know which angle you're going in. So having these presenters come in has been very nice to
Good.
narrow in and see where the paths can go.
I also like how Meg and Jay, like on this green
Mhm.
initiative thing, how they've taken the ball and ran with it. That helps us a lot,
It
so
does.
we really appreciate it.
That was a great presentation. I wish we'd had that when we first
Yeah,
started.
like, what, 2
So-
years, 3 years
Yeah.
ago?
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have one.
Yes.
So if you recall, I don't remember how many months ago, maybe 3, 4, 5 months ago, the mayor wanted us to consider having nighttime meetings, okay? And we considered it, and we concluded that this format that we have currently works best for us and the staff, but we decided that when the season came around, that we would consider having at least one night meeting of some kind to see if we couldn't get more attendance in the audience here. And so I just wanted to remind us, the season is, it's already started basically, the winter season. And if we do find something, I'm not saying that we have a meeting like we're having today. I'm thinking we find somebody that can give an excellent, relevant presentation, and they tell us that they're available, just faking these dates, they're available on February 15th. And that would be great because it's, down the road, and we can be advertising and marketing about it and say, so-and-so's coming to the village hall on this day, and, have all of the stuff with the media platforms we use and so forth. I don't know who that might be, I don't know what that might be, but I have really enjoyed these presentations, and whoever's making all that happen that's great.
A living
But,
Reef topic.
yeah,
would
try
be
to think
a
of,
good one.
somebody try to think of something that would be enough to get people to come here and yes.
Just a joint one with Jupiter and Arrows and these guys, and maybe Jay Lona, just talking living shorelines.
Mhm.
There's so much information that
I agree.
Jay Lona could give an update on what they're doing. I mean, I didn't even know it, but did you guys know that they're also doing something north of the bridge too? So,
North of
you know,
the-
you,
The bridge.
You mean,
Cato's Bridge.
you mean Jupiter Narrows people?
No, Jay Lona. So Jay Lona, everyone knows about the south part.
yeah,
but
yeah,
they're
I
also
mean-
doing something on the north part too.
Yes,
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I knew that.
What do they,
I presented that.
They're gonna have like the wall.
You presented the south side.
Well, part of the drawings, those were all of the drawings.
I must not have even looked at the
Yeah.
north side part.
No, and my comment was that they were fully funded to expand up to the north side as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But either way, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's
and
understood.
living shoreline, February?
Yeah, it could be like, whatever you wanna call it, symposium kind of a thing, and,
And we could even do it to try and sell people on what they can do to do living shorelines, right? So,
Start the education
the educational
process.
component.
Yeah, and that timing that you're suggesting too maybe is enough for us to have done some homework and proposal writing, right? And have a
Yeah.
rough draft, or maybe something even more than rough,
yeah.
to include in there if it's appropriate.
Exactly.
All right.
All right, I just wanted to
Okay,
Should we
remind us,
shoot for a month?
February.
Maybe February?
whatever y'all think, I mean, you know, we
February's a
got,
good month.
everybody gets distorted in their thinking in December.
December through January is, yeah,
Yeah.
I think February's your best.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
think
month of
February's
lull.
best too. In March,
Because March starts up again for end of school and blah, 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 November, but,
April, they're already heading north, some of them.
and that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
February sounds good to me.
All right, well, we'll shoot for that.
We'll find out what's
Um,
available here to pick from for March, February.
For
I'll
February.
bring some dates
Okay.
at the next meeting.
All right, good.
Alright.
Any other?
I just have a comment for the good of the committee. Brad, you're doing an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
You're doing really good.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Is that the last item?
That's it.
I
So-
make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who's opposed?
Who's gonna say nay to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody know how old that banyan tree is by Bayview?
I think Bay Harbor was